All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Shai Schmelzer. With me is also Blaine Carter and Murtaza Miji. We are all from the product management team for Visual Builder and Visual Builder Studio. And this is the Oracle Visual Builder new feature seminar for the second half of 2024. We'll be covering basically what's new in the last couple of releases and covering just things that you can start to use basically today if you're using Visual Builder. We basically did two releases in the past several months. We did a release in August that was release 2410. This was a release of both Visual Builder and Visual Builder Studio. Hopefully at this point of time, you all know about the differences between those two. Visual Builder is basically the hosting platform for standalone application. Visual Builder Studio is the development interface that we recommend to use. It's giving you the workspace approach to developing visually with Visual Builder. It also includes deep integration with Git and automation of continuous integration and continuous delivery, CI/CD. Visual Builder Studio is also the tool that you get as part of Fusion Apps to do a customization of all the pages over there. Visual Builder is basically a place where you can develop your own application outside of Fusion Apps and host them over there to cover any application needs that you have. So in August, we did a release that was both for Visual Builder and Visual Builder Studio. So the features over there were in both things. In October and a little bit into November, we did release 2501 and then another little patch on it, 2501.1, which you all should have access to right now in Visual Builder Studio. This was only a release for Visual Builder Studio, so it's only for the design time aspects and the features that have to do with development, not for the runtime. One thing to remember, you can use Visual Builder Studio 2501 and develop an application that deploys to Visual Builder 2410. So that's actually what we recommend. We recommend that all your development will be done through Visual Builder Studio. It gives you, again, much deeper Git integration, a lot of other capabilities in terms of automating the whole development lifecycle, making sure that your code is backed up and things like that, making sure that you can revert changes, and as well, a bunch of new features that are basically a few months ahead of when you would get them in the design time in Visual Builder, because in Visual Builder, you would only get those in our 2504 releases. When we upgrade the design time, we're also upgrading the runtime libraries. So if you're on 2501 right now, you'll see the Visual Builder runtime 2501. You would also see that we're using Oracle Jet version 17 over there. One thing to keep in mind about our upgrade cycle, we do require upgrade of applications if you want to continue to develop them, basically every 4 releases of Visual Builder Studio or every 2 releases of Visual Builder. So we support a few releases back in the design time, so you can still do visual development, for example, right now on 2410 and 2407 and even 2404. But if you have an application that uses an older version of the runtime, you will be prompted to upgrade your application. So please upgrade. You'll get the latest features, you'll get all the security patches, everything else, and the best support also in terms of performance and other aspects like that. So make sure to, whenever you're prompted to do an upgrade, just go over and do the upgrade. Upgrade should be pretty easy without any impact on your application. All right, so let's talk about the new features. So as we said, we are now using Jet 17. One thing that you might have noticed if you're following Jet, they did a lot of work on what they call the new core component spec. And that's basically re-implementation of a lot of the components in a new architecture that gives you better performance for your application when it's running. It's using VDOM architecture. And you can use those components also in Visual Builder. Okay. Now, one thing to know about those components, right now, those components don't support theming or skinning, so you can't modify their look and feel. This should be just fine for you if you're building anything that has to run as part of Fusion apps and you want to have the same look and feel, then those components are part of the Redwood design that we're using in Fusion apps, and therefore you're safe to use them. However, if you're building your own standalone applications and you are planning on basically diverting from our design, from the Redwood design, if you want to change color, fonts, or stuff like that, don't use those components yet. Okay, at some point in the future, we would add support for theming for those components as well, and you'll be able to use those then. If you are okay with using the Redwood UI and the Redwood look and feel, and you want to use and take advantage of those new components, we now require an opt-in in your code to let us know that you're okay to use it, and then those components would show up in your design palette. There's a little piece of code over here that you add to your visual application.json. You can find it, of course, in our documentation. Once you do this, you would see that in your component palette, beyond all the components that you've already been using, you'll get a bunch of new components that are right now marked as early access because they are not supporting theming, and you can start to use them as is. Most of those components basically cover the same functionality you had before, but again, with better architecture for the components, better rendering time for your pages. Some of the components do offer new functionality. For example, the multi-select component has some new functionality in there as well. So again, if you want to use those, make sure that you're okay with not doing any theming to your application, and you can add this code and you'll get all of those components now, a pretty hefty bunch of components over here. All right, action chains. So several versions back, we introduced the concept of JavaScript action chains, replacing JSON action chains, basically giving you a much better development approach, a much more debuggability, I would guess you would call it. That's the ability to debug your applications. Basically just by setting breakpoints in your source code, and also being able to integrate more seamlessly with just JavaScript code that you're writing. So this has been in the product for a while now. One thing that you would notice now is that any new action chain that you create is going to be a JavaScript action chain. Up until now, we were allowing you to do a choice between JSON and JavaScript. We are now moving to just JavaScript. All the new features that we're building are just in the JavaScript area. All the new actions and all the new capabilities are just aimed at those JavaScript action chains. So if you haven't already started to leverage those advantages, you will now have to do it, basically. One thing we did add is the ability to call a JavaScript action chain from a JSON action chain. Okay, so in some, I would call it edge cases, you might already have a JSON action chain and you create a new action chain, which is JavaScript, and you might want to call one from the other. We were always able to call a JSON action chain from a JavaScript action chain. Now we are also able to do the reverse. So if you have an existing JSON action chain, you can call a JavaScript action chain directly. So that's a new action that you would see in the action chain, in the action palette, basically. We don't require you to migrate your existing JSON action chain. They can just remain as is. Of course, if you want to be able to debug them and do the advanced capabilities, you're free to migrate them, but we don't require migration. We don't expect to disupport them also. So those should just continue to work as is. We did a lot of enhancement also to the development experience with action chains. We now have the ability to do a search. So you would see up here at the top, the ability to do a search for an action chain or for a string in your action chain and locate it in your code directly. There's a new bar up here that allows you to also look either at the full code of your application or just a summary of the action chain. So it gives you a more condensed view, enabling you to see more of your actions over here. We also allow you now to drag actions directly into custom code. So if you have a part of your action chain that is just JavaScript code that you've written, you can now drag an action into that code directly in the code editor. We also introduced a shortened syntax for variables. So up until now, when you refer to variables, you would use something like page variable and the name of the variable. We don't require the page prefix anymore. If you just do $variable and the name of the variable, we assume it's the page variable over there. Again, would make your code cleaner and more concise. There's an operation called, well, there's a feature that we have, which is tracking dirty status for variables. So basically track if a variable has been changed. And there was an action chain that allows you to reset that status to basically say, hey, now we're considering those as no change. We enhance the action chain now to allow you to do this for specific variables and not for all the variables in your page. So that's another parameter for the reset dirty status action. And we also introduced a new action test coverage tab that gives you a better view of the tests that you created for your action chain. So hopefully you all know that you can create declarative tests that run on your action chains, monitor that they are not breaking your logic, basically enabling you to do test-driven development. We now have a better reporting over the coverage of the code that you're developing. So if we'll go for a second into Visual Builder, just an example, this is an action chain. You can basically do a search here. As you type something, you'll see this highlighted and you can navigate between the instances using those buttons. You can also look at the summary view. As you can see, it a little bit more condensed. It's hiding stuff that is not needed. For example, if you look at the fire notification over here in the full view versus the condensed view, and also the call rest information here, kind of hiding stuff for you. If we would look, for example, at let's see, this action chain. This action chain also has a bunch of tests that are defined for it. Okay, and you can see the coverage report here and the results as well. At the bottom of your screen, you now have this test tab over here. You can see the results of your test. So if you run your test, you can see what's happening here. And you can also get the coverage report. So you can see that I didn't create right now tests for a lot of things, but there is this page over here, the department page. Okay, and we have a few tests here that are covering 6% of our code. Specifically for this action chain, I'm covering 50% of what I can test over here. Again, if you have never created a test for your code, just to show you the very basics, you have an action chain, you can go over to the test, you can create a new test case. For example, what happens, we call it when we get 3. You get parameters that you can set. For example, what happens if this variable is equal to 3. Then you can also add mock values for things like calling rest and stuff like that. And then you can say get suggestion. We actually run through the code based on the parameter you added, and we get what is the expected results. And you can add those as things that you check on your test case. Okay, then you can run a specific test and see how it goes. Okay, and or run all of them and see how those go. So this gives you basically ability to add coverage and tests for your code. As you modify the code in your action chain, those tests are automatically run. And if something breaks, if something that you expected to perform in a specific way no longer does it, you'll get a notification and it would be easier to fix it because you would know what broke and you have it immediately when you break it. We actually have a nice blog entry on our blog right now that covers how to do testing also when calling REST services and mocking it up, something that Blaine wrote. If you haven't checked it out, check it out on our blog. Right, let's look at some other features that we had. Business rule for dynamic components. So a lot of our Fusion apps pages are based on dynamic components. Dynamic components allow our users to customize how things show up later on in their application based on all sorts of rules. We did a lot of work on enhancing this rule editor right now, something called the business rule. This is, by the way, also available for you if you're building standalone VB apps and you want to use the dynamic components. So this would allow you to do things like hide and show fields based on some condition, or make a field read only based on, again, on conditions. The conditions can be things like based on the user role or based on a value in a page, things like that. Now, again, you can also achieve all of those without the dynamic components in a regular VB app just by using bind if components or the if component now. But this also is another approach if you're looking for something that is a little bit more declarative in nature and a little bit less code involved. Okay. So we did a bunch of enhancement over here, created this new editor here, allowing you to create your new rules over here, define the conditions. We have an improved condition builder with more conditions over here, and we also allow you now to define messages for all sorts of validation. So again, this is something that everyone on the seminar that is using Visual Builder to customize Fusion apps would be using. If you're building standalone apps, you can use it if you want to, don't have to. Right. There's a bunch of other new features in Visual Builder. One of the things is auto-wire of fragments event in containing pages. Let's show you this as an example. If you're developing a page over here and you have a fragment that you use, for example, we have a little fragment here that allows us to show the picture of someone and also update the picture. So this is, for example, coming from a fragment that someone developed, and you can actually see the fragment over here. Okay. Now this fragment has an event. Okay, it's a custom event. And when I'm using it inside this page, if I go over and I create an event listener, right now I don't see this event over here. Okay. The new feature allows whoever creates the event in the fragment to say, hey, I want to auto-wire this event. So I can give it a name, get passport image. This is an event that emits to the containing page. And then once I do this over here and I go to the page that uses this fragment, if I now go and I say, hey, I need a new event listener, and I scroll to the end over here, you would see this new event available for me here. And I can basically go over and create an action chain that would handle it. So again, this is something that is useful for anyone who's developing fragments that other people are using. It makes it easier for them to locate the events and hook up code to those. Another new feature is support for JET asynchronous events. That's a new capability that is in JET 17. And this is really useful for components that might be handling multiple events. One key advantage or one key usage where you would see it is in editable tables. So I know a lot of you are building pages that involve editable tables. One thing that you might have noticed is that when you exit, for example, a row after you edit it, you sometimes see a flashing of the previous value or the next row value happening there. If you actually enable the asynchronous events, this would take this flashing away. So look into that, read our what's new documentation, and you'll see how to use it. Again, some of the components in JET now support those asynchronous events, such as the table, and you can now start to use it. Another new JET capability is a component called OJIF. This is basically kind of an enhancement on top of the bind if component that we had before. OJIF doesn't require a surrounding span or component or div to be in order to show the changes. So if you need to conditionally show or hide things in your pages, up until now you were using the OJ bind if. starting now, you can start to use the OJ if option. And the last enhancement that I'll mention in this section is that if you have page input parameters, okay, so those are parameters that are defined in your page. When you are using those inside Visual Builder, you can specify a value for it at design time. What we now allow you to do is also associate a list of values with this input parameter. So when someone is opening your page in design time and needs to set a value for a parameter, they can pick this value from a given list of value that is mapped to some REST call. This is actually something that is done at the code level. If you want to use it, again, look up our what's new documentation, and there's a little paragraph or chapter that covers exactly how to set this up and add this to the definition of your variable in the JSON. Another thing that is new for the designing guys who are building application is a new version of Redwood. As we progress, Redwood is always evolving. For those of you who are not up to speed, Redwood is basically the way it's our new design system inside Oracle. We've been using it for all our Fusion apps. You can also use it to build your own application if you want to take some of the best practices that we use internally to build our application based on user research, on best design patterns and nice design and effective design and innovative design. You can base your application on those Redwood templates and Redwood components. So you're getting a starter application template that you can start from. You're getting page templates and you're getting components that you can use. As you would see, once you add or enable this Redwood design patterns in your application, you would see when you create a new page that you can choose from a list of page templates. Again, there are some new templates over here that have been added in the latest versions. We have for each component and template, there's documentation in the component exchange, but we're also producing blogs that show you how to use those. So if you look on our blog at blogs.oracle.com/vbcs, you would find, for example, in the next, in the previous month, we created blogs on using the smart search component, using the hierarchy viewer component, how to use the column selection capability of the panel collection component, and how to use the collection detail patterns. Some of the blogs over there, but you would also find older blogs on, for example, the guided process or the drawer components or things like that. Just to show you how your application can look like, if I actually run this application right now, this is an application that implements some of the things that we are showing in the blog in terms of patterns for your application. So it's going to start with the hierarchy viewer component. And then we'll navigate to a few other pages that are based on other components. I'm just hoping that my session has not expired. Click on it one more time. Right. Let me verify just one thing. Yeah, we have a little, I guess, I don't know if it's network outage or not, but let me see if it works in the design view here. Right. Okay, so instead of running the application over there, we'll show you it over here. So this is our hierarchy viewer. We can actually hide this part as well. And you can see it basically show you a hierarchy of employees. You can see a department. So one of the things that you can do in a hierarchy view is you can have different levels in the hierarchy showing different types of information. So a department just shows the name and the location. Employee shows an image and also how many directs this employee had. Okay. So for example, we know Chris has two directs. And if we click on Dave, it would do an animation and would show us who works for Dave. Okay? And then we can navigate back up the chain, basically up and down the chain. And you can see it's a nice animation. And this is, again, something that you can use in your environments to show an application working or to show information that goes. So it's working over here, right? So just navigating up and down. And again, doesn't have to be employees, of course. This can be a product hierarchy, any hierarchy information you have in your organization. This is a nice visual way to show it. From here, we can also navigate to the Smart Search page. So a Smart Search page basically enables the user to do complex queries through a simple search box. Okay, so beyond just looking for example, for all the employees who have SEA in their name, like that, or all the employees who are managers, like that. Okay, so I can search, for example, both on the name and on the job. I can also have some what we call filters over here. For example, I can search by country. So I can say, hey, I want to see people who are working either in India or the United States. Okay, and then I get this list filtered only to those countries. Okay, I can say, hey, I'm interested in people who are working or who have a salary in a specific range, and I can modify this range. Okay, like that, make it a little bigger or make it a little smaller. Okay, I can choose a department that I'm interested in. It's only well, I don't have anyone in IT apparently, so we can go over to marketing and see if we have someone there. No. Yeah, okay. And then this is combined with the actual ability to do a search by string, so just SH and all of those. So this gives you a nice compact way to define queries based on any of the fields. You can define which filters would be here. You can define how they would look. So this is, for example, a filter that allows you to select multiple values. Okay, you can then remove filters as you go along. Okay, this is a filter that allows you to choose a number range, but we also have something that allows you to choose a date range and things like that. So this is the Smart Search component. Again, something that you can include in your application. It comes with a bunch of events and logic that you can use in your application to do your own filtering. If we go to the AMP info page, maybe that page is not working right now. No. Okay, so this is the employee report. So this page, for example, allows you to choose which columns you want to show in a table dynamically. So this is based on the panel collection pattern or panel collection component in Redwood. It gives you this ability to show a list of columns. People can then rearrange columns so they can move name to be ahead of it. They can say, hey, I'm not interested in showing the emails over here, and then click and they get their own order over here. Okay, and then say, hey, I do want to show email, want it to be, for example, the second one, picture would be just before it, and we want to hide the job and the salary. Okay, like that. So this is something that is basically, if you use this component, you just set up two variables and you add this capability to all your pages or to the page where this is included. So again, we have a blog that shows how to use that one as well. And let me see if the AMP info page, I guess I might have changed something in the action chain previously to break it. So I'll just show you that one from here. That's the collection detail pattern. Switch to live view. Right. So this is, again, this is another pattern that is very commonly used in pages where you show a list. You can have this list searchable. Okay, so you can do a search here. But then when you click on someone, you would show the details on the right side. So this is a pattern that we have implemented over here. and then you can click to edit information about this employee and click update to save the information. So it's a built-in template for a page with those areas in place that allows you very easily to develop those type of list and information about a specific item with either the ability to edit them or not, up to you. One thing to remember, all of our patterns are mobile friendly. So if you go into a mobile mode, so if this is the size of your device, you can still do drill downs, still works the same thing. You can see the menus change based on how you do stuff over here. Okay, so if you now need to change the salary, this is all done in a responsive way directly for you. Okay, if you need to add, again, like the countries filter, we do those type of capabilities for you. And if we go to the reports page, again, same functionality still works here. Okay. So some of the new functionality in Redwood, you don't have to use Redwood in your design, but if you want to follow the best practices and what we learned from our users, feel free to use those. Right, let's talk about some of the features in the application lifecycle area of Visual Builder Studio. So that's beyond just developing an application, maintaining it. So one of the things you might have noticed, I'm using dark mode now in Visual Builder Studio. That's something that you can do in your interface over here, both in the design time and in everything that is in here. You can choose either to use a dark background or use the bright background that we had before. In the environments area, one of the things we added is the ability to work with Oracle Cloud resources rather than IDCS resources when you're adding environments. So if you go into environments right now, and I would go to create a new environment, and I know that right now I might have a little issue here, but let's see if it works. What we're doing right now is we're actually querying the Oracle Cloud infrastructure to find out all the Visual Builder and Oracle integration instances that you have in the various compartments over here in the various data centers. There's actually a little bug here that we'll be fixing and releasing pretty soon, where we're querying a little bit too much information right now. So this is why you're seeing this taking a little bit too much time. Once we get it, you can then add instances of Visual Builder, but now also Oracle Integration Generation 3. So this is one thing that once people upgraded from Gen 2 of OIC to Gen 3, they noticed they were not able to add Gen 3 OIC anymore. Now you can add those again into your application or into your environments, and then you can define lifecycle events and CI/CD operation on Oracle integrations, do things like export, import integrations or packages or lookups between instances of Oracle integration, help you automate the lifecycle of those things. Another thing that we added is if you're working with Oracle Fusion apps in environments, we now allow you to do connection to Fusion apps using OAuth instead of basic credentials. So that would be useful. All right, so we got the list of instances here. You can see Visual Builder and integration. If I do, for example, a Gen 3 here, you would see that I can see instances both for like this specifically VBCS. This is part of OIC, and this is the actual OIC instance. Okay, so I can now add an OIC instance into my environment and start to define build jobs that would work on top of it. Okay. Right. Merge request is another area where we did a lot of work and enhancement over here. It's becoming more and more important as more and more teams basically grow in size and more developers are involved in working on collaborating together. There's several things that you can now do with a merge request. One of them is you can retarget a merge request. So a merge request usually takes a code from one branch and merge it into another branch. We can now take, for example, a merge request that is in process and target it to another branch. So for example, if you decided, hey, we don't want to maintain this branch anymore, there's another branch that we're working on, you can take and do what we call a retarget. Another thing that you can do is you can reopen a closed merge request. So maybe you started a merge request, things didn't go according to plan, there were too many issues in there, you closed it for a while, now you can reopen it and continue to work on it. Another thing that you can do is you can switch your merge request to be in draft mode. And draft mode allows you to basically indicate, hey, I'm not done with the changes. I got some feedback on my code. Maybe I need to do some more changes. Don't approve anything right now. I'll switch it to from out of draft mode once I'm ready. Okay. The other thing that you can see over here is the reviewer status icon. So you can see each of the reviewers of a merge request. What's the status? Are they okay with what you did? Did they approve? Did they have some action item for you to see? Gives you a brief view over what's the status of your merge request in a visual way. We also added an advanced editor for comments that you add on your code. And we also allow you now to create branches from a remote. So when you create a new branch in your workspace, you can base it on a remote Git branch. If for some reason you're using a command line to create your merge request and you're not using the capabilities to do it from the web interface, there are now new parameters for the command line for creating a merge request that allows you to add all sorts of aspects like the reviewers and stuff like that. And lastly, we improved the email formatting for the notification that we are sending about merge request. This is helpful if, for example, if you're looking in your email client using a conversation view, it would bunch everything that has to do with a specific merge request into this conversation. We also improved what we're actually showing at the top. So even if you're just looking at the subject and the first line, you would have a much better understanding of what's happening with your merge request. You don't have to open the full email to get the brief overview of what's going on. Okay, so again, if we go back into our merge request over here, and we are looking into a merge request, okay, I can see over here that Jeff has a one need attention for me, so it gives me information about what I need to do. Over here, of course, I can read what Jeff said about my code. I can reply to Jeff, and then I get a nice editor over here. And I can do like option 1, option 2, that, and I can do all sorts of formatting for the communication that we have between us. Okay, so that's a nicer editor. Over here, you can see that I can put this into draft mode. If I need to now address the issues that Jeff gave me, I can go over and address them as needed. Once I'm done, I can put it out of draft mode. I can say, hey, let's retarget this instead of going to the main branch. Maybe it needs to go into the test branch, okay, like that. So that's the retarget button. If we go into merge requests that have already merged, another thing that you can do here is say, hey, we need to reapply those changes onto another branch, okay, and basically take those and reapply them. So again, a bunch of enhancement on this merge request. Read our documentation for more information on all of those. Issue tracking is another thing that you can do in Visual Builder Studio. We basically have a complete issue tracking system. And one thing that we did here is we added more statuses for an issue or a task that you have. Beyond just being new or resolved or assigned, we now have 3 new statuses that you can assign here. Okay, in progress, in code review, and awaiting third party. So the issues go through a life cycle. So if, for example, if I create a new issue here, fix menu navigation, okay, and we'll say, hey, this is a little defect that we have here. It's minor, and this is a new issue. And I can say this is due by the end of the week. And I create the issue. Okay. As we progress our work on this issue, we can now go over to the statuses and we can move it to other things. So for example, we can set it to be assigned. Okay. And save. Okay. And after the assigned, we can do something like awaiting third party. Save. So this allows us to kind of go over and see how things are progressing in a bit more details. This would also, of course, be reflected in our dashboards, okay, over here, when you can see your sprints and stuff like that. Let's talk about some of the new features in the Fusion app extensions. So the first thing, and probably the biggest thing, is something called the extension lifecycle page. As people are creating more and more extensions, multiple developers are working on different workspaces in the project. Extensions might be deployed from various locations. We now have one central place where you can get information about all your extensions, and that's the lifecycle page. So when you're looking at an environment that has Fusion apps, you would see the extension lifecycle button. And when you click on it, you would see information about, about all your instances of Fusion apps and which extension is deployed to which instance. Okay, so there's a central place in your project, and remember, you should have one project for all your extensions. In this project, you'll be able to see which extension is on which instance. You'll also be able to delete extensions if you need to, or deploy extensions to another environment. So if you see, for example, that you have an extension right now on one instance, let's say on your dev, and you want to promote it to test, you can do the deploy to environment directly from here. And again, environments you can now define using the OAuth approach, which is, by the way, required in order to be able to do all of those changes that you're doing here, because then you're not based on a single user in terms of the view. So it gives you a view of what all the users are doing, all the extensions on all your instances. Most of you who are doing customizations for HCM and SCM pages are using what we call the express mode for doing extensions and modifying and customization of pages. We did a lot of work on this express mode in the last couple of releases. We now automatically create a project. So our preferred approach for you guys to get started with customizing pages is always start from Fusion Apps, okay, from the page that you want to customize. Go over to the menu and do the Edit in Visual Builder Studio option. We then do a lot of things automatically for you. If you don't have a project yet, we will create a project for you. If a project was created, you would automatically be directed into that project. We would automatically also point you into the right workspace if you already have a workspace in place. This is all helping you enforce our best practices of having a single project, a single workspace per developer. Okay. We also make sure to have the right repositories in place, a distinct repository for each pillar. So you would have a Git repository for HCM, a Git repository for CX, etc. We did a lot of work also on how we show dependency management enhancement. So if your extension is using dependencies on other stuff, we have a better view right now on how this is done in the design time. And we introduced something called publishing without CI/CD. Okay, a lot of customers said that they wanted a faster cycle for publishing changes that they do, and you now have an option to set your workspaces at the project level to do publishing of customization without running through the CI/CD pipeline. Okay, once you do this, if you turn this switch on, which is by default, this is how it is right now. When you click publish, we take your extension or your customization and deploy it to the development environment. Okay, we don't run through the whole CI/CD pipeline. You can opt in to use the CI/CD, the pipeline, and also remember that if you want to promote it to other environments, you might want to create a CI/CD pipeline, for example, to take your code and move it to production, of course. Right, so this was a quick overview of some of the new features that we added. It's the most important ones, I guess, but it's not all of them. So one thing we always recommend that you do is go to our documentation page on docs.oracle.com. Under the Visual Builder Studio and also under the Visual Builder, you would find a specific book called the What's New. If you go into this book, you'll see information about probably the last 4 releases. On each new feature, there's a link to further documentation. And if you want to leverage this feature, we recommend that you read that. Of course, we also have a lot of information in our blog. So if you haven't visited it, if you haven't registered to get updates, blogs.oracle.com/VBCS, there's an RSS feed over there, and you can get notified every time that we have a new blog entry over there. Blogs are coming from everyone in our team and also from other people inside Oracle. So you would find there, for example, a few recent blogs that cover how to use Gen AI and all sorts of AI functionality that Oracle provides inside Visual Builder. You would find all sorts of tips and tricks for advanced things that you can do with JavaScript Actionchains, things that weren't possible before. So give it a read. It can make your work more efficient. If you're running into any issues, we have forums on the Cloud Customer Connect. This is where you can ask your technical questions, your how-to, or if you have a problem. That's probably your first line of defense. Go over to our Visual Builder forum on Cloud Customer Connect and ask your questions over there. We're monitoring it. Other developers that are using Visual Builder are also helping there. We're trying to create this community of people helping each other over there. So if you run into an issue and someone else ran into the same issue, it's very likely that they'll be able to help you. And finally, if you want to keep up to date with all the new stuff in Visual Builder, every new blog entry, every event that is coming up, every blogs that other people write, we have a LinkedIn group called the Visual Builder LinkedIn group. So if you're on LinkedIn, do a search for Visual Builder, find the group and join it. It's free to use. We keep it very focused on just Visual Builder. You won't find there any spam or anything that is not related to Visual Builder directly. And if you're writing any new blogs, if you have any tips, please feel free to also publish on this location and let the members of the community know about it. And that's basically all we had time for today. Let's see if we have any open questions right now. In the chat, by the way, you can find the links. Blaine posted the links for the LinkedIn page and also our forum. The dot variable is something we added in 24.10, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not 25.1 new feature, it's 24.10. But yeah, the dot variable instead of dot page variable is something we added there. Why not make the events checked by default? That's option that we can consider. The thing is that in some cases, you don't handle all the events that Fragment does in a specific page. So Fragment can add multiple events. You might just need to handle some of them. But that's definitely an error that we can consider. In ERP Fusion Classic page, I would have sandboxes and add page composer to add tile that would link to a BIP report. Am I still looking at using bespoke app UI? I'm not sure I understand the question, but again, App UI allows you to create new pages in Fusion Apps. Inside those pages, you can do whatever you want. So yeah, you can create a new App UI page and call from it a BI report. You can create, and the new App UI basically would show up as a tile. We actually have a blog post on our blogs that show how to embed a standalone visual builder app inside Fusion app using an app UI page. Okay, and basically just use an iframe in there. Using Visual Builder in ERP Fusion, not VBS. Again, Visual Builder is aimed at standalone application. If you want to then take this application and bring it into ERP, that's the blog entry that I mentioned. If I'll just go for a second to blogs.oracle.com/VBCS, that's our blog homepage. You would see, again, for example, how to use Gen AI from Heatwave. And we have an entry here about how to embed a visual builder in Fusion apps. And that's basically how you can take your existing standalone app and bring it as a tile inside Fusion apps. Is deployment without CI/CD instant? It's a matter of a couple of seconds. Okay, so yeah, it would take a little bit time, but it's faster than waiting for the CI/CD to fire up. Okay. There's a question here about derived column with SQL Ruby. Visual Builder basically uses regular columns, but if you can expose those regular columns, those derived columns as regular columns, we can use it. If not, this is an ER that I would suggest that you file with Oracle support, and we'll consider it for future versions. Also, one other thing to know, if you have ATP-backed application, you can also use ORDS to expose functionality from your database and then use ORDS, the Oracle REST data services, inside Visual Builder UI. Can we trigger export, project export job using API? Yes, all our build jobs and pipelines have REST APIs that you can use to fire up those build jobs and pipelines from outside the visual interface. So you can have some process, for example, that runs the build jobs every night at midnight and does something. Can a complete project be imported from one Visual Builder Studio to another? Yes, there's an option for exporting a project and then importing it to another instance. That being said, again, if we're talking in the context of Fusion apps customization, you shouldn't be doing it. You should only have one project across all your instances. You can now basically add ability for other users from various Fusion app instances to access the same project. But if you want to export and import a Visual Builder Studio project, yeah, it's available. Check our documentation. Yeah, the question repeats here about using an iframe inside an app UI. And yes, you can do this also again in an app UI that you build. In terms of doing it inside a page that Fusion Apps created, that's something that you would need to request the Fusion Apps team to allow you to customize their page. But if you create your own page, you can definitely do an iframe in there. In Fusion Apps, should the project encompass all pillars? The answer is yes. HCM, ERP, all of them should be in a single project. Each one of them would have a separate Git repository. If you're building or if you're doing customization of Fusion Apps, please Do a quick Google for extension best practices. We have a section in our documentation that covers some of the best practices that would make sure that you'll be the most successful possible over here. All right. Is there any other open question? I don't see anything right now. Right. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Hopefully this has been useful for you. We hope to see you in our next seminar. Please join our LinkedIn group, post on our forum, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.